Have you heard about the Promised Land? It's a political lightning rod in West Asia. Every religion has its own version. The Jews believe it was the land promised to them. Promised by who? God. That's what Jews believe. In the last century, another promise was made, not by God, but by Western countries who liked playing God. They promised to carve two states out of Palestine, one for the Jews, one for the Arabs. And for the last 100 years, this promise has divided West Asia. Why are we talking about it now? Because it seems some countries have forgotten this promise. Let me show you what's happening in the West Bank. Diggers and cranes are rolling in. Israel is building 1,300 new settlements in the West Bank. Remember, this is not Israeli land. It was captured during the 1967 war. Palestinians claim the West Bank is part of their future state, but Israel's new government is not interested. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is opposed to the two-state solution. He himself once headed a settler lobby. For him, it's just spare land. This construction spree will not stop here. Israel is discussing plans for 3,000 more houses in the West Bank. Now, most of the world considers these houses to be illegal. This includes Israel's own allies like the United States and the European Union. So why are they not stopping the Israeli government? That's what Palestinians are wondering.
The settlement programs that have been announced and are still being announced by Israel place the world, and especially the United States, in front of great responsibilities to confront and challenge the fait accompli that Israel imposes systematically.
The new settlements are flashpoint number one. Flashpoint number two is this. Israel has designated 6 Palestinian civil society groups as terrorists. These are basically rights organizations and activists, but Israel says they are funneling money to militants. Now, both the United States and the United Nations have condemned this move. Washington says it was caught off guard. Apparently, Israel did not even inform the US about its decision. Naftali Bennett is not bending to Joe Biden's will. He recently boasted about his meeting with the US president. Bennett said that he said no to Biden 3 times on Iran, on West Bank settlements, and on a Palestinian consulate in Jerusalem. 3 no's to his closest allies. America has repeatedly pushed for a two-state solution, but this is a more firm and hardline Israeli government. Getting concessions from Naftali Bennett will be close to impossible. So who can the Palestinians bank on? What happened to their Arab friends? In simple words, the Abraham Accords happened to them. The UAE's Air Force chief visited Israel on Monday. 2 years back, this was unthinkable. Israeli media is talking about joint drills between the UAE, Bahrain and Israel. Their common enemy? Iran. 6 Arab nations have normalized their relations with Israel. They're exchanging ambassadors, running flights, expanding tourism, basically spinning a lot of money. Where does that leave Palestine? Abandoned and helpless. Their biggest supporters are Saudi Arabia, Iran and Turkey, 3 countries who can't agree on a single thing. So it's fair to say the promise has been forgotten. Not the one made to Israel, but the promise made to Palestine. Forgotten. This two-state solution was first suggested in 1917. The United Nations endorsed it in 1947 and then again in 1974. More than 100 years later, Israel has a state, Palestine doesn't. Clearly, the world community did not keep the promise, but Palestinian leaders are also guilty here. Their politics is fractured. If a government wants to engage with Palestine, who do they talk to? The government in West Bank or the Hamas in Gaza, or both? Movements succeed with clarity in vision. They succeed with stability in leadership. When Yasser Arafat died in 2004, Palestine lost both. Clarity in vision and leadership. And since then, their politics has been divided. Palestine has held just 1 legislative election since 2005, 1 election in 15 years. On the other hand, Israel has been on a lobbying spree, whether in the US or in Europe. The prime ministers are busy charming lawmakers or taking on presidents. The promise of Palestine was a collective promise made by the world. It was a fervent cause in the Muslim world. But then came money and business. The Arab world saw opportunities with Israel, and Palestine became a forgotten promise. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.